Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and well. Some of you may recognize us from before. We are here to give you a presentation on teen dating violence. Some of you all have seen us maybe before in the past. We usually go around to schools and do presentations on various topics. My name is Celeste.
And my name is Zach.
So we work for an agency called Suburban Family Shelter, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that in the next slide. But what we're here to talk about, teen dating violence, and we hope that you're able to get a lot of information from us today. So South Suburban Family Shelter, we are a nonprofit agency, and we offer services to people who have been impacted by domestic violence. So some of the services that we do offer are emergency shelter, transitional housing, medical advocacy, court advocacy, counseling. We have abuser intervention classes, community education department, which is what me and Zach do. So we go around and we educate the community on violence, on domestic violence, so on various topics. And then we also have the 24-hour hotline number. So that number is 708-335-3028. All of these services are free except for the abuser intervention program. And all of the services are available in both Spanish and English. So our main office is located in downtown Homewood.
And that 24-hour hotline phone number is for someone in an emergency situation who's going through dating relationship violence. Okay. So we said the main topic was teen dating violence. So maybe some of you remember what this is, but if you don't, it is a pattern of abusive behaviors used by one person to maintain power and control over another person within a teen dating relationship. So the key words are underlined and bolded here. We've got pattern and power and control. So it's a pattern because these things tend to happen more than one time. Later on, we're going to talk about the cycle of violence and what that is. And the other keywords are power and control. And so maybe now you start thinking about what might power and control mean in a dating relationship, because we'll be talking about that. And dating violence has no boundaries. So it does not matter what school you go to, what age you are, what race you are, or what neighborhood you live in. Dating violence affects everyone.
Yes, unfortunately, it does affect everyone. Okay, so here are some stats. Some of you may be sitting here wondering, why are they talking to me about this? Why is this important? So the reason why we're discussing teen dating violence today is because nearly 1.5 million high school students nationwide experience physical abuse from a dating partner in just 1 year. Teens often do not recognize signs of abuse or do not seek help. Now take a moment and think about, why do you think maybe some teens don't seek help? And we'll discuss this in a minute. Also, women between the ages of 16 to 24 experience the highest levels of dating violence. Okay, so this is just about high school age. You all might already be there, or maybe you're almost there. So that's why we're discussing this, because this is something that is very prevalent and very common, and unfortunately is something that you're probably going to see.
So when we talk about dating violence, whether it's adults or teens, we tend to think of two different people in the relationship. One person's the abuser and one person is the victim. So I'm going to break down the abuser. So the abuser is the person, as you may have guessed, that's doing the harm or the abuse. And there's a big myth that alcohol and drugs cause the abuse, but they do not cause a person to be abusive, because that is a choice. Now, it may make things worse. It can cause a lot of problems for other people. I'm not saying to drink or do drugs, but we can't use that as an excuse for when someone chooses to be violent. And also, more times than not, it is the male in the relationship the stats used to be 90 to 95% of the time it was male. However, sometimes we see stats where it's closer to 7 out of 10, but most of the time it's the male in the relationship. And two things that they want to use power and control. So just like that teen dating violence definition, that's what the abuser wants to use.
Right. So then the victim is a person that is being hurt, and it's usually the female in the relationship. But as Zach just mentioned, sometimes it can be the male. So if about 75 to 80% of the time the male is the abuser, that leaves off the rest for the female. So about 25 to 20% of the time the abuser could be female. So if someone stays in an abusive relationship, that doesn't mean that they like being hit. A lot of people like to assume, well, if they stay, that's because they like to be hit. That is not true. Why do teen victims stay in their relationship? So that's something to think about. Why do teen victims stay in their relationship? There could be a lot of reasons. And like I said before, this is something that we're going to discuss.
So teen dating violence consists of 4 main types of abuse, and these types of abuse are used to maintain power and control. So let's break these 4 types down to make them a little bit simpler. Physical abuse is one of the most obvious ones that you may be thought of right away. So that is hurting someone's body, that's slapping, punching, it could even be biting, pulling hair, pushing and shoving, but it's anything that harms someone's body.
Yeah, so usually when people think of abuse, they think of physical. There's also verbal emotional abuse and mental, which we categorize all 3 words in one because they're very similar. So that could be hurting someone's feelings or bringing down their self-esteem, threatening them, yelling, cyberbullying, humiliating, manipulating, isolating, controlling, intimidating, using jealousy, possessiveness, or guilt tripping. So these are just to name a few. But I would like to point out that this is still abuse, even though it isn't physical. In some cases, it could be even worse than physical because it's really damaging a person's self-esteem and a person's mentality.
The third type of abuse is sexual abuse, and that's unwanted touching, pressuring into doing sexual things, coercing into having sex, or for sexting. So we'll get into what consent is and what coercion is in just a few slides, but that's sexual abuse.
And then lastly, we have property abuse. So property abuse is actually a type of abuse that is very, very common amongst high schools. So property abuse is damaging somebody else's belongings. So that may be burning, stealing, breaking, destroying, sometimes even hurting pets.
So we added this slide in because now many of you will not be in school for the time being, but these types of abuse can still happen even over the phone and using technology. So examples of this would be forced sexting, demanding passwords, or stealing the phone to check someone's activity, excessive check-ins, messages, photos and videos, negative or degrading posts or photos. So just take a moment and think about what types of abuse are involved using technology. And we also want to remind you that using technology in your relationship is not bad, but you should be aware of your boundaries and that these types of abuse can happen even when you are not in person.
All right, so we're moving on to the cycle of violence. So the cycle of violence, basically, a lot of people who were or are in abusive relationships, they were asked in a study, what kinds of things happened in your relationship? What kinds of things are happening? So what was found is that all of these relationships go through the same 3 phases, these 3 steps. So this is how somebody can recognize whether they are in an abusive relationship, if they're going through these 3 steps. And so the first step usually starts off at the tension building stage right at the top. So this tension building stage, what is happening is that the abuser is starting to get angry. It could really be about anything. It doesn't specifically have to be about something that the victim did, but the abuser is now feeling angry, and the victim may be walking on eggshells. So if you've never heard that phrase before, walking on eggshells, it basically means that you're watching everything you say or do because you know what could happen next. So now the next stage, we have the explosion stage down at the bottom in pink. And that explosion stage is when abuse occurs. So whether it's physical, whether it's sexual, whether it's emotional or property abuse, sometimes maybe even all four, that's where this happens. So we like to ask you all, what do you think happens next? First, the abuser gets angry, and then the abuse occurs. So the next thing that happens, we call the honeymoon stage, when the abuser apologizes. So this can be in many different shapes and forms, but they do apologize because they want to get the victim to stay. They don't want the victim to leave. And so they're going to apologize in whatever way they think is going to work the best, depending on what they did at the explosion stage. They're going to try hard to make that up. So whether it's buying the victim flowers, saying, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen again, sometimes even crying about it. So whatever it is that they do, they're going to make sure that they try and get the victim to accept their apology. And then what happens again? It goes back to the tension building stage where the abuser starts getting angry again. So this is, like we said, this is a pattern. It's something that keeps going over and over and over. So if somebody finds themselves in this situation, they'll find that it never ends. It keeps on going because it's a pattern. Now, on average, take a moment and guess. On average, what number do you think? On average, how many times does an abusive relationship go through this cycle before they decide to end it or to stop it? So I'll give you about 5 seconds to think of a number. So that's about 7. So about 7 to 8 times have the studies have found that's the average for people going through this cycle. So take a moment and think about that. Somebody is actually in this cycle right now, going through the tension building stage, and then the explosion stage, and then the honeymoon stage, and then it starts over about 7 times before they even decide to do anything about it, to get help, or to tell anyone.
One easy way to remember, if that was difficult to memorize, you could always remember the 3 A's that we have on here: anger, abuse, and apology. So that might stick easier in your mind. But you also might be thinking, well, if it just keeps happening over and over again, that can't be good. How can we stop this cycle from repeating? And we've got 2 ways. So 2 ways to end the cycle of violence would be to end the relationship or to get professional help. So at our agency, we don't ever tell anyone that you have to break up. And maybe if you have a friend who's going through dating violence, that might be the first thing you want to do. You might want to just tell them to break up, end the relationship. But we always want to make sure that we let that person make the choice for themselves. But oftentimes, if the abuser won't change their ways, this is one of the only ways to end the cycle of violence. A second way is to get professional help. So at South Suburban Family Shelter, we have abuser intervention classes where we have people who have chosen to abuse, and they meet with other people and try to reflect on what they've done and find new ways and healthier ways to have a relationship. So those are 2 different ways to end that cycle of violence.
One thing I'd like to add to this is just to sit and think about what are some reasons why it could be hard to end a relationship. Because we talked about these 2 ways to end the cycle. You could either end the relationship or you can get professional help. A lot of us sitting on the outside and not knowing exactly what these people are going through may think to ourselves, why don't they just end the relationship? Is that easy? Is that simple? All you have to do is end the relationship. But for a lot of people, this can be very, very difficult for a lot of different reasons. So that's definitely something to think about. So safety planning. What should you do if you find yourself in one of these relationships? You can definitely talk to a trusted adult. You have a lot of trusted adults that you can talk to, especially in school. So you have whoever, maybe your parents, your guardians, your teachers, your school counselors, your social workers. Definitely, if you talk to a trusted adult, they're going to get you the help that you need and they're going to do their best. So a person can also obtain an order of protection. Now, these can be obtained at the courthouse. We do have people from our agency currently working at the Markham Courthouse to help others get orders of protection. You can also use the buddy system. So try to walk around in the hallways. If you do find yourself in a situation like this, try to not be alone and try to walk around with friends. You can speak with the school about changing your class schedule, your locker, or your transportation if needed. You can change your passwords or privacy settings on social media as well.
Okay.
Now we've got 6 keys to a healthy relationship. Now we know that there are a lot more than 6 keys, but we're going to talk about these 6 today. So these are the keys that are very important in a healthy relationship. If one of these, or if some of these keys are missing, that definitely means that this relationship has something that they need to work on. And so the first one we have is respect, which is very, very important. It's very important to respect one another in every relationship. We also have good problem solving. So this is important because arguments and disagreements are always normal. And so if somebody is in an argument and doesn't know how to problem solve, it's probably going to lead to a fight, is going to lead to something that is not healthy. Good communication is very, very important. So communication is important because you need to talk about things. Whatever it is that you disagree on, it's important to talk about it. One that I find very interesting here is clear expectations. Okay, so that's one that we might think, oh, of course we need clear expectations, but what does this actually mean? Clear expectations, whatever you want to get out of a relationship might not be the same as what the other person wants to get out of a relationship. So making that clear, whatever it is that you do or don't like, whatever it is that you do want to happen or don't want to happen, don't be afraid to make those things very clear. Also, self-esteem is important. Why is self-esteem important? It's definitely important to feel good about yourself before going into any relationship. So studies have found that victims in domestic violence, most of them already did have low self-esteem before going into a relationship. So that does make a person more vulnerable if they do have low self-esteem. So definitely work on how you feel about yourself. Make sure you have high self-esteem before you even think about dating or going into any relationship. And then the last one is also very important. So it's very important to be able to trust each other in a relationship.
So now that we've talked about abusive relationships, we've talked about healthy relationships, let's talk about some that might be somewhere in the middle, even though most of these are going to lean towards the abusive side. Here's a few warning signs of an unhealthy relationship. So I'm not going to read all these to you, but I do want to point out a few of them, and I'll give you just a moment to look over them. A few of them that might stand out to you are jealousy and anger. So, of course, it is okay to feel angry. Everyone gets angry, but it's what you do with that anger that really defines whether your relationship will be healthy or unhealthy. And the same goes for jealousy, too. It's very natural and human for everyone to get jealous, but jealousy should not cause you to choose violence or to use a type of abuse. And then you also might see towards the bottom here, criticism and blame. So these really, they get towards emotional and verbal abuse. And we have to think of better ways to communicate, which is why those were some of the healthy keys for a relationship.
All right. So what is consent? Consent is a freely giving agreement between partners to engage in any sexual activity. So this is really communication. It's communication between partners. It's letting someone know whether something is okay or not. So it's also a means of respecting your partner's boundaries. That kind of goes along with the slide where we were talking about clear expectations. So you have to respect those boundaries. You have to respect those clear expectations. And it's also needed for every activity, every single time.
So one way of understanding consent is to understand its opposite, which is coercion. Coercion is getting someone to do something that they do not want to do. So that could be physically forcing, it could be blackmailing, which we left in black, threatening or manipulating, or pressuring, which can include drugs or alcohol. So coercion is, remember, sexual abuse. These two go hand in hand, and it is the opposite of consent. You're not respecting someone's boundaries.
All right, so here we have some warning signs. How do you know that? How do you recognize whether someone you know, maybe a close friend, is in an abusive relationship? So these are some warning signs that let you know that this person might be in an abusive relationship. For the victims, they may have sudden changes in their appearance. Maybe they start wearing long sleeve shirts. Maybe they start wearing turtleneck shirts or excessive makeup. They may avoid contact with friends and family. So we talked about isolation and how abusers tend to isolate the victim. They may spend all their free time with the abuser. Now, again, this can be normal if it's their choice, but if you notice that they suddenly change their plans because they're forced to spend all their time with the abuser, this could be a sign. Maybe they cry a lot or are moody most of the time. They may be very stressed and may show some physical symptoms. They may have sudden changes in their behavior, or they defend their abuser and his or her actions. Now, some warning signs that your friend or someone you know might be an abuser is they may have sudden or drastic mood swings. They may act macho or cocky. They may be jealous or very controlling. So now when we say jealous, we mean excessive jealousy because like Zach mentioned, being jealous can be normal, but excessive jealousy is abnormal. So now they may be cruel to animals and or children. They may have a history of battering, or they're constantly checking on their partner, and they may blame others for their own problems.
Oftentimes we are asked, how can I help a friend who is being abused? So here are a few different suggestions. You could calmly start a conversation with them, offer your friendship and support. You want to listen, but you don't want to judge or blame. Help your friend build a support system, and offer solutions, but allow your friend to make their own decision. So it's really important to let them make their own decision and make sure that you are not just taking over control of them when someone else is trying to control them. So a few things you might want to say to them is, I'm here for you. I'm glad you came to me with this. And what do you want to do? Give them back that power and control that they were missing. And also be patient because they may not recognize the signs of abuse as quickly as you do.
That's right. So now what if my friend is the abuser? Some tips that you can do, you should definitely never encourage abuse. You can talk to your friend about his or her actions. So a lot of people sit on the side and believe that it's best that they stay out of it, but definitely talking to somebody about it and pointing it out is very helpful. Sometimes they're not aware of what they're doing, or they're not aware that what they're doing is wrong. Okay, so they do need somebody to talk to them about it. Listen and encourage him or her to get help. You can help your friend understand that abuse is always a choice and everyone is responsible for their own actions. So abusers may like to blame other things or give other reasons for why they do what they do, but deep down, it's their responsibility. It was their choice and they are responsible for their own actions. Now, you can also let him or her know that domestic violence is against the law.
Okay, I'm going to bring us back here. So I want to thank everyone for listening to our video. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions on what to do if you are in a situation and you still don't feel comfortable, you can always call our 24-hour hotline phone number, which is listed there, or check out our website. Any
Thank
closing
you.
words, Celeste?
Just thank you. Thank you for listening. We hope that you've learned something from us. We hope that if ever the day comes that you do need this information, it comes in handy. We also have brochures available for you if you want something that, some type of notes or something that you can look back on. We have brochures available, so just go ahead and ask your teacher for those, and we do have those handy.
All right. Thanks, everyone, again, and
Okay,
hope to see
thank
you
you.
soon.